Hello friends of the channel, welcome back. I would like to have a look in this video at the top 5 most amazing mating attacks. And this time our featured player is Jan Nepomniachtchi. The Russian player from the generation of Magnus Carlsen is a fantastic attacking player. So it was not difficult to find 5 very interesting examples. And according to my taste, the following 5 are the most spectacular ones. We start with his game where he is playing with the white pieces against fellow Russian grandmaster Dmitry Volyanov. Let's have a look at the position. Black has just played the move knight c5, hoping to get a grip in the center. But Jan is first, and rather than exchanging one of these minor pieces by taking on c5 or d6, he plays here the move knight f6 check. Fantastic knight sacrifice. Well, it's not really a sacrifice, because if you do take the knight, g takes f6 with discovered check. If the king goes to h8, it's queen g7 checkmate, thanks to that pawn. Black has only one move, it's king h8. And then you think, well, what is the knight doing on f6? Well, Jan had calculated deeper. He played the move queen h5. Again, a mating threat on h7. Black doesn't have much of a choice. If you push the pawn forward, then black will probably face this move knight g4. When there's time to take on h6 next, either with a pawn or the knight even. So g takes f6 is the principled move. Now it's a full knight sacrifice. What has white in mind? Well, if you do recapture with a pawn, there's no longer the mating threat. Black has this possibility of coming over around with the rook. So there followed rook takes f6. And now you see that black's pieces on the queen side, they are too far away. They cannot help out. And for instance, if you play a move like queen e7 with the idea to meet rook h6, threatening mate, with the move f6, well, then the g-pawn becomes decisive, g6. And nothing can be done against rook takes h7 check, and white will win the queen. So instead of queen e7, rook g8 was played. But then the pawn on f7 can be taken. White is renewing the mating threat. This had been calculated by both players. Rook g7. And it looks as if everything is under control for black. But after rook takes, king takes, there is this move g6. Fantastic pawn sacrifice, opening up the diagonal for the bishop. And for instance, if you think, well, let's try to bring the queen over, then it's bishop check. Crushing check. You don't really want to go to the f-file. That leads to checkmate. And if the king goes to h8, then, well, there's g7 check. And black has nothing better but giving up the queen. Let's take it back. After g6, of course, the pawn can be taken. But then there is queen h6 with check. And black is for a choice. Should you stay in the corner or can you run away? Well, if you try to run away, it's not really going to work out well. There's rook f1 check, bringing another piece into the attack. The king is open. After king e7, it's queen g7 with checkmate to come. After king e8, it's queen f7 mate. If the king goes immediately to e8, you capture the pawn with check. King d7, rook f7 check. And if you block this check, you would love to give a check with the queen. But first, you better eliminate that defender. The knight on c5 covered the e6 square. You cannot take with the bishop. The bishop is pinned. But if you take back, it's queen e6 with check. And you're ready to take next on e7 with mate to come. If you go king e8 and you stick to the piece, there's just rook g7 and the king is caught in the middle. There's nothing to be done against rook g8 with mate. Therefore, Volyanov decided to go back with the king to g8. But white takes the pawn. And king h8. Is this just a repetition of moves with queen h6 back and forth? No, it's time for a silent move, because still black's pieces are too far away. Rook f1. Very simple and strong. You're threatening to enter on f7. And it's very difficult to defend. Like for instance, if you try to bring the queen over, you can just capture the bishop on d6. Black cannot leave the bishop undefended. If you go rook c7, trying to cover the 7th rank with that rook, it's bishop g5, attacking the queen. And bishop f6 is also a big threat, giving checkmate. If bishop e7, Then the bishop interferes along the 7th rank. It's time for rook f7 and nothing to be done against queen h7 with checkmate. Very nice example. In the game there followed bishop f8, but after rook f7, threatening mate, queen h4 only move to cover the mate. And after bishop g5, well, now Volyanov had seen enough. There's nothing you can do. Mate is unavoidable, like bishop f6 is coming. You could give one more check, but after king h2, the checks are over, and white has simply too many threats. What a devastating mating attack. Let's have a look at the next example. Game of Nepo with the white pieces again against Li Chao. Very strong Chinese grandmaster. Was a Petrov opening. Looks very calm. White's bishop is under threat. But look what Nepo did here. He just sacrificed the bishop. Incredible idea. Trying to remove the g-pawn so that the queen can come in. But things are far from obvious. The bishop can of course be taken. It leads to similar play what happened in the game. Because Li Chao took first the pawn with check on h2. King went to h1. And now probably black should have taken the bishop anyway. White's idea is to give check on g4. And after king h8, play knight f5. Threatening mate on g7. If you would defend now with rook g8, attacking the queen, looks as if it's game over. Well, there's rook e8, fantastic deflection idea. Pinning the rook. And whatever black does, it's queen g7 with checkmate. If you take, it's mate on g7. And if you go knight d7, for instance, well, it's also queen g7 with checkmate as the rook is pinned. Relatively best for black would be to whip off the knight with the bishop. But after queen takes, position is still quite unpleasant. For instance, white has a lot of ideas to bring a rook into the attack. This pawn is weak, the king is still wide open. And after queen f4, well, there's queen h3, and at least you can win the piece back at some point. But it's still a little tricky, but white is on the better side of the table. In the game, instead of capturing the bishop, Li Chao played bishop f4, which seems to be a very effective defensive move, because you would like to exchange the bishops and everything is under control. But instead, there followed bishop takes g7, beautiful sacrifice, with the idea that after king takes, the queen comes in. And after king h8, anyway, knight to f5, threatening mate again. Rook g8 is met once again by rook e8, same idea. So black is obliged to take the knight. Bishop takes, queen takes. And now queen d6, with the idea that if you play something like bishop d3, intending to give mate on h7, black has queen h6, check, and is even about to take over by coming on the next move with the queen to h2. But white played very nicely here. Played the move g3, which attacks the bishop. The bishop went away, but a second additional point is that the king can come over to g2, freeing the path for the rook along the back rank. Rook h1 is on the agenda. Black played b5. Tricky move, because you would love to play bishop d3, threatening mate, but that allows queen d5, forcing the exchange of queens, and black is still a piece up. So instead, Nepo dropped back with the bishop to b3, retaining control over that d5 square. Black played queen g6, offering the exchange of queens. Very natural move, because otherwise, if you do give white some time, there will follow, for instance, rook h1, rook h5, and the other rook will come over. And these two pieces, they are simply too far away to help out. Queen g6, very understandable, but look what Nepo did, and he definitely calculated better than Li Chao. He simply exchanged queens. This may have come as a huge surprise. With the idea that after f takes, there was rook e7 cutting off the king along the back rank and opening up the path for the rook to come over to h1. If the rook is on h1, the bishop cannot be defended, and you see the black king is caught in a mating net in the corner. Black tried here the move g5 with the idea that in case of rook h1 there is still rook f6 and the rook protects the bishop. But rook e6, very intelligent move, attacking the bishop and not giving black the chance to defend with the rook. King g7 and now rook h1, attacking the bishop. Only move, otherwise you just lose the piece again. Rook h8, but then rook e7, and the black king is caught in a mating net somehow. If you go king f6, attacking the rook, we go rook h2 e1, intending to come in. After knight a6, rook check, king has to go up, rook f7 check, the bishop still defends the rook, king g4 only move, and now it's bishop to d1, it's checkmate, the king cannot go to h5. If the king goes back to f8, it's rook h2 e1, knight e6 for instance, and now rook f7, king g8, rook e7. What a deadly combination of two rooks and the bishop. Rook f6 is among the threats with checkmate. In the game there followed king g6 instead, but after bishop c2, black resigned. After king f6, rook h2 e1, threatening mate on e6, g4, to make some space for the king to come to g5, but mate is inevitable. Forcing sequence of moves, and after bishop g5 it's rook e takes g5 with checkmate. Why did I pick this example? Because I think it's very difficult that once you have sacrificed the piece, that you can also sometimes still exchange queens as long as the other pieces are working well together and ready to attack the enemy's king. Let's go to the third example, which is a remarkable position. I flipped the board here because it's a game of Artemiev against Nepo. Nepo with the black pieces. And objectively, things have not gone well for him. But the white king is caught in the center. It's on f1, cannot castle. The rooks are disconnected. But here Artemiev played the move knight g3. Probably a move like g4, attacking the bishop and trying to connect the rooks with king g2 makes more sense. But let's have a look at this move. Knight g3 also does attack the bishop. Pause the video for a second if you would like to solve a nice combination here, because black has a very unusual attacking motive. I would like you to invite to find the right move for black. In the game, Nepo played here an incredible move, bishop to b1, completely insane. But the idea is actually very logical. You cut off the path for the rook. So black is actually threatening rook e1 with mate. But what about rook takes b1? Well, there's queen d3 check. It is a double attack. If the king goes away, you take on b1, knight f1. But now even beautiful finish of the game. Queen takes f1, king takes f1, rook e1 with checkmate. Let's take it back. White can still try king g1, which was played. But after rook e1, the knight had to come back. And now queen d3, threatening mate on f1. Queen g4 check, king h8, bishop e2. The only way to defend the knight still. But simple move, rook takes e2, rook takes b1. It's a tricky idea, because if you do take the rook, white still has queen takes e2. You shouldn't allow that. But look at the activity of black's pieces. And with the rook on the second rank, we have a new target. Bishop comes back to c5, threatening to give mate on f2. That's why h4 played, so that the king can still escape. But after rook takes f2, black still have a devastating attack with a deadly discover check, or even rook g8 coming next. After rook e1, there followed rook f4, and black resigned as the queen is lost. Sorry, white resigned, of course. Let's go to the fourth example. Now we have a position with Nepo having the white pieces against world champion Magnus Carlsen. Let's have a look. It's an incredibly sharp position. And here Nepo played the move rook h4, intending to get a queen involved. This is very dangerous. And if you would take on g5, attacking the rook, bishop takes, queen takes, bishop takes d7, bishop protects the knight, knight protects the rook, black's compensation is insufficient. Magnus played here the move g6. But now look, queen to g4, ignoring the threat, with the point that after g takes f5, it's queen h5 with mate to come. The knight on f5 cannot be taken, while the queen even protects the pawn on g5. Black didn't want to allow ideas of bishop takes d7, followed by knight h6, and then that d7 square is really vulnerable, will lead to mate. Magnus played here knight c5, but now queen h3 on the board. I should mention that here an insane resource for white was not spotted by both players. King f1 could be played. What is the idea? Well, if you play a random move like bishop e4 to attack the knight, there's bishop a5. What an amazing tactic, deflecting the queen from protecting the bishop. If you do take, it's knight takes e7. And the big difference is that now queen takes a5 didn't come with check. That's why king f1 is so great. Knight takes e7 is check, king g7, and now beautiful tactic. Rook takes, king takes, queen h4, and after king g7, it's queen h6 with checkmate. Just a very beautiful line, difficult to spot. But the game is not less elegant. Let's have a look. Instead of king f1, they followed queen h3 with very simple intentions to take on h7. Apparently after bishop takes g5, remarkably enough, black is still holding. Rook takes h7, bishop takes d2, check, king takes d2, and now queen to g5. Trying to get the queen involved. And one of the ideas is that after king c3, knight e4, apparently there is some counterplay against the white king. So very difficult to find. Let's not go there. But instead, let's have a look what Magnus did. What Magnus did is by far the most human move. He played h5. He didn't want that rook to capture on h7. But now rook takes h5, boom. Taking on h5. G takes h5, queen takes. What is happening here? Are there any threats? Well, black cannot do too much. And if white gets the chance, he would love to play g6, threatening mate on h7. Knight e6 was played, and here, after this move, Magnus resigned immediately. He realized that white can play g6 with his mating threat. After f takes, queen takes, king h8. First, before capturing the knight, we give a check. King g8, queen takes e6 check. Rook f7 is met by knight h6, and you capture on f7 on the next move. White is piece up with a devastating attack. Only move, king h8, but then queen h6, king g8, queen g7. You see, it rarely happens that Magnus gets crushed in such a way. Only Nepo of his generation is really capable of doing that. For this was a nice example. Let's go to the final one. Nepo with the white pieces against Levon Aronian in the Grand Chess Tour in Paris. Looks like a pretty balanced position, symmetrical position, but with the next move, bishop takes f6, Nepo opens up the king side and brings the queen in, threatening to take the pawn, but in fact the pawn is not too relevant. After something like king g7, there would follow rook to d7 and the f7 pawn. That's our main target. If black would defend here, that pawn, there's queen g4 check, king goes away. And now after a move like b4, the bishop is in trouble, and there are all sorts of ideas to play queen e4 or bishop e4. It's a really strong attack. Instead, Aronian thought, why not to take the pawn on a3? Looks very natural, but it's in fact a mistake. I will show you why. But first, probably better would have been bishop e7. After queen takes h6, apparently after something like rook d8, black is able to generate counterplay, and although it's a pity that he's a pawn down, white is unable to profit from that right away. Bishop takes a3 on the board in the game. Rather than taking that pawn on h6, we are playing for big material. We don't care about pawns. We go after the king. Rook d7, threatening to take on f7 with mate to come. If you would give a check on c1, that makes things only worse, because that rook was really needed to protect the pawn on f7. Levon played here rook f8, protecting f7. And now, once again, rather than taking the pawn on h6, white played the move bishop e4. The bishop gets involved. Things are heating up. Note that black doesn't have the chance here to protect the pawn with king g7. Looks as if everything is under control, but now the point of white's last move is revealed. Queen g6. Pawn on f7 is pinned. After king h8, it's queen h7 with checkmate. Therefore, the move f5 was played to close off the diagonal for the bishop. But now, look what Nepo did, and he had been calculating this from afar. Queen takes h6, he ignores that bishop. What is the point? Like after f takes e4, it looks as if there's only queen g5 and you give check on the g and h file. It's only a draw. But look what he did instead. Rather than giving the check, he played here amazing move. Rook d5. The rook comes back. These moves are the most difficult to find. These retreating moves, backward moves. But the main point, of course, is that after e takes d5, the queen can be taken. So the pawn on e6 is pinned. How beautiful is this to get the rook involved? Rook g5 is a big threat. If you would go f6, queen g6, king h8, rook h5 with checkmate. In the game, there followed queen takes e3. Bizarre move, but after queen takes, e takes d5, queen g5, the rest was not too difficult for Nepo. He just wrapped up all the pawns, had a bunch of checks, and the game was over very soon. I hope you like these top 5. I think these games are incredible. But if you think something is missing, please let me know in the comments below. Nepo has so many great games, so could very well be that I just missed something. I hope you like the series. Don't forget to subscribe, and very soon I'll cover another player. Bye bye.